Hey. Hey. It's good to be here. It's good to see you. I'll tell you, that was a hard act to follow. It's always a special joy to be here, to join Aaron and Diane, and this time this crew of singers, and Laura Berman, who sang with me, and Jenny and Jack for the High Holy Days this last year. She's a trip. So I don't know about you, but I'm having some trouble these days. And I started wondering, how come we're having so much trouble? Like, how come we're in the state we're in? And I think I know it's because before we came here, we decided this time we would not forget. This time, entering a body, we would remember who we are. We're sure of it. I mean, we thought we'd remember last time, but we didn't remember, and so we just knew this time we'd remember. And just like every other time, right when we're born, the angel comes and touches us just below our nose and makes a dent. No, this is true. And with that angel's touch, we forget it all. You know what this is called? The dent above your nose? It's called a philtrum. You could amaze your friends with that. Hey, pretty nice philtrum. Or, how's your philtrum? We forget because we have a job to do when we get here. And the job we have to do when we get here is so overwhelming, we have to plunge in and do it. And the job we have to do, coming from a place of such amazing interconnectedness, the job we have to do is create for ourselves clothing. And I don't mean this clothing. I mean the clothing of our personality, the clothing of our separate identity. Only we do that so well. We not only convince those in whose presence we create that, and it's created to serve that situation. It's created in order to get from our environment the most we can possibly get. The fact that we're here means we were successful. But then we bought our own story. We forgot, actually, that we made it. Here's how it goes in the Kabbalah. Kabbalah is the heart of the Jewish mystical tradition. The word Kabbalah means that which is received. Lekabel in Hebrew means to receive. So Kabbalah is the ongoing tradition of revelation within Jewish tradition. And technically, Kabbalah focuses on the 32 paths of wisdom. The first 10 of those paths are illustrated on the front of your booklet this morning. And that diagram is called the Tree of Life. And actually, I think on April Fool's Day, I'm going to be doing a workshop focusing on that. That's a map of creation, that's a map of consciousness. The path down the tree is called the path of creation. The path up the tree is called the path of spiritual awakening. The other 22 paths of the 32 paths of wisdom that the Kabbalah technically focuses on are the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Anybody know tarot? You guys ought to know tarot. I mean, if you don't know tarot, what I'm about to say will make no sense to you. So listen, go find out about tarot. All right, for those of you who know tarot, it's the origin of playing cards. But it was originally used as a way of unfolding the different levels of what's happening right now, the different levels of reality. And in the tarot, there are 22 major arcana cards. And those were representations of the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Each one illustrating a particular way that a universal energy translates itself into the world. So the second, so I would say tarot. Oh, you won't understand this at all. Okay, good. All right, so you know tarot is often written in a circle, T-A-R-O-T, and that's why there's a T at the end of the word tarot, even though it's not pronounced. Okay, but originally those were Hebrew letters, and Hebrew is read from right to left. So it was read Torah. So remember that to tell the people when they find... God, it reminds me of a story, and if I don't tell it, I won't be able to think of anything else. You know the mullah, the Sufi fool sage? So the mullah is finally prevailed upon to give a sermon at the local mosque. He really didn't want to. I don't want to do that. He finally comes to give a sermon, and he stands up and he says, "Do you know what I'm going to talk about?" And they say, "No." And he says, "Well, what's the sense of talking?" And he leaves. So they think about it, and they want to hear him talk. So they figure it out. They go to him, and they prevail on him to come again. And he says the same question, "Do you know what I'm going to talk about?" And they say, "Yes." And he says, "Well, what's the sense of me talking?" And he leaves. But they still want to hear from him. So they figure it out, and this time they've got it. They finally prevail on him to come. He says the same question. He says, "Do you know what I want to talk about? Do you know what I'm going to talk about?" And half of the group says yes, and half the group says no. And he says, "Okay, you guys tell them," and he walks. That had nothing to do with what I'm talking about. So the letters of the Hebrew alphabet, some of those specific energies is what I'm going to be doing in the second of the two workshops, and that'll be on the first Saturday of May. Everybody's going to sign up. Oh, never mind. Okay, so one of the great luminaries of the Kabbalah was named Isaac Luria. Isaac Luria was a leader of the mystical community in the Galilee, in the city that's called Tzfat in Hebrew and rendered Safed in English. which in the 16th century was the heart of the Kabbalah. And he came there and became the major teacher. And among the incredible wisdom that flowed through him was something called Shvirat HaKelim, the breaking of the vessels, the shattering of the vessels. And the vision he brought was, at the beginning of creation, the light that sprang from nothing, the light was so brilliant and so powerful that it could not be contained in the vessels that had been prepared, and they shattered, and the sparks just went everywhere, embedded in the world of matter, embedded in the material world, embedded in what's called a klipa, a shell, klipot, shells. And the function of the spiritual, one on the spiritual path, is to liberate the sparks that have gone astray in the physical world. And how do you liberate the sparks that have gone astray in the physical world? I mean, you don't go to a klipa and try to pry it open. You go to a klipa and you see through the shell to the essence of that being. And the awareness frees. Consciousness is the greatest power. So the consciousness of the spark frees. Now, of course, each of us is a klipa. Each of us is a vehicle of the material world that houses a spark that's gone astray. And when we forget that that is who we are and think that we are the shell, we wind up in some serious challenges. Because what happens is we start thickening the shell. We start thickening the shell because when we think that's what and who we are, we have to defend ourselves against other shells. We have to watch out for what's ours. We have to take care of our own. We have to choose sides. And soon, for many of us, the shells get so thick and so hard that we live our lives seeking to justify ourselves. We live our lives seeking to have other people praise us. We live our lives seeking to have others tell us we are right and we are good. I don't know if you know anybody in our current political situation who might fall under the category of a development of a superb klipa, a superb shell. But we all have it. It's not the possession of anyone in particular, but we can recognize when a shell gets harder, when a shell gets thicker. You know how a shell gets thicker? A shell gets thicker through fear. A shell gets thicker through anxiety. A shell gets thicker through shame. A shell gets thicker through guilt. Oh. A beautiful shell is striving to protect us, but it winds up doing the opposite. We strive to build these shells around ourselves to protect ourselves, and the very protection keeps us from realizing what's going on here and who we are. So I want to tell you another shattering. The other thing that shattered were the tablets that Moses carried down the mountain. Remember that? Hopefully more of you know about that than about tarot. In a remarkable story, Moses goes up the mountain. He came down, he did the 10 Commandments, he went up the mountain to get the rest of the book. But he stayed too long and people got afraid. So they came to Aaron, whom he had left in charge, and he said, they were so afraid, he said, give me your gold, and he made a golden calf, and they're dancing around the golden calf. Moses comes down the mountain with the tablets. He sees what's happened, and he smashes the tablets. And one of the interesting things is there's a Midrash. You know what a Midrash is? A Midrash is an expositional legend. And Jewish tradition is filled with Midrashim, with stories that take biblical characters and biblical events and expand upon them. In this case, there's also a Christian Midrash that says the same thing, but they don't call it a Midrash. And the legend is that those first set of tablets were different from the second set of tablets. That the first set of tablets were a spiritual reality, a spiritual teaching, and the second set of tablets had some of that, but also had rules. Because it was clear that we were not ready for the truly spiritual teaching. We had to first learn to tame our egos. So those rules were given that we got to handle our shells. The first set of tablets, the Midrash says, were inscribed with letters by God. And the Midrash says that when Moses came down the mountain, the tablets were really light because of the spiritual energies of those letters. But when he saw the idolatrous behavior, the letters themselves flew off the tablets, and they got so heavy, he couldn't hold them anymore, and they fell. And there's a legend that those letters flew out, and letters found themselves embedded in all the cultures of the world, like as a spiritual core. And I think it's more than that. I think those letters flew out and embedded themselves in souls. I think each and every one of us has a letter of that teaching embedded within us. Each and every one of us has a special sacred way in which we are to bring that universal energy into reality in our world. And our challenge is to remember it, to discover it, to express it, and to celebrate it. So here's the secret to getting out of a klipa. Because what is required is love. Our shells thin when they are loved. And by love, I don't mean hugging our shells all the time. I mean opening to a consciousness that totally accepts the shell exactly as it is in this moment. I mean an unconditional love that awakens for the shell in its current condition. Not the way we normally do, where we go, well, I'll accept myself as soon as. I'll accept myself when. With all the positive and the negatives that we carry within us, accept all that. With all the joys and all the pains, all the celebrations and all the fears, accept all of that. because that's the nature of the shell. And when we only accept what we consider to be the okay parts, the sacred parts, the holy parts, the good parts, we actually strengthen our shell. So you can do that right now. It's the only time to do it is now. As you're listening to me, you can be aware that you're listening to me. Here you are, sitting in a body, having a mind, sitting in this place, right? And if you allow yourself, you can move just a little bit behind your mind. The interesting way to do that is to start noticing. You start by noticing the body. It's really interesting to be here in a body. It's not our direct perception, you know. Very few of you are aware in this moment that you are looking at me through two holes in your head. Very few of you are aware at this moment that you are hearing through two other holes in your head. Just allow yourself to move back and know that there is someone in there who is hearing. There is someone in there who is seeing. And that someone is behind your eyes. That someone is behind your ears. There's someone in there who's thinking, and you can be aware of the one who's thinking without getting caught up in each of the thoughts. You can watch the judgments. Even the judgments you're making right now about what I'm saying. The mind is always doing that. I've learned to stop thinking I can change the mind. Forget it. The mind does what it does. I don't mind. Just pull back. Pull back to that place where you can be aware, I have a body, but I am more than the body. I have a mind, but I am more than the mind. I can be aware of the mind, but I don't need to be grabbed up in the mind's judgments, the mind's stories. And in that place, I can simply embrace the mind and embrace the body. Exactly as it is right now. Here's how it sounds. Were that witness place able to speak, it would say, I am exactly where I want to be. I am doing exactly what I want to be doing. I am with exactly the people I want to be with. And I am exactly the one I want to be. I'm going to ask you to say those after me. But say it from that place behind. Mind can't do that. Mind will raise all kinds of objections. But just from behind, that gentle witness place, this is what it says. I am exactly where I want to be. You are. Obviously. I am with exactly who I want to be with. Again, obviously. I am doing exactly what I want to do. I am exactly the one I want to be. Well, yeah. And you could just feel, if you allow yourselves, the shell just wants to melt. It'll still be there enough to take care of us. But it won't be there enough to hide ourselves from ourselves, or to hide ourselves from each other. You're exactly where you want to be, and I'm exactly where I want to be. And thanks for being here with me.
Thank you, Rabbi Ted, for being here with us today.